Hello students, Mr. Greg here. I hope you're having a great day. Welcome to lesson number 10. Today we are going to hook up the joystick to our motor and see if we can actually operate the motor in two different directions with our joystick. This will be a useful task to learn because at some point we would like to be able to operate two motors with two joysticks and actually drive a robot or a remote car or something like that and be able to program it to do what we would like for it to do. And so this is the beginning. And so I have the setup from last week, as you can see here on the diagram, and I want you to go ahead and get yours set up like this if you haven't done so. And then we're going to connect the joystick like we did in a few lessons past. So let me get this to where I want it. All right. So one of the things I learned from last week was that the diagram was too small and you couldn't see it, and so I'm going to put it up here as a full screen, and that way you can pause and go back and review it and all that. And also those of you who are in my class, I will be emailing that out on Google Classroom so you can have it and print it also. So here is the diagram. Once I get the camera out of the way, and now you should have an opportunity to see the wires and how they're connected. Some feedback I got was that the video last week was a little too small and it's hard to follow, so I apologize for that. I'm learning it just like you are. And so today, now that you've got that, I'm going to go ahead and minimize it back down. And let's hook up our motors. I do not like this. There we go. All right. I'm going to go ahead and hook up. The motor's already hooked up. I'm going to go ahead and hook up my joystick. So get the good old joystick back. If you remember before, we ended up hooking all of the connections up, the 5 connections up, because we were dimming the LEDs per the input of the joystick and actually using the click button. But today we're not going to need to do all of that. We basically want to turn our motor in one direction when we push our joystick in one direction, and we want to turn it in the opposite direction when we pull our joystick in the opposite direction. And so you're really going to only need 3 wires. And since I'm going up and down, that is the y-axis, and so I'm going to hook up my ground. Hope you can see this. I'm getting better at it. I'm going to hook up my ground wire and my 5-volt wire, and then I'm going to hook up my y-axis wire to my Arduino. Now I have them all plugged in here, and honestly that's just for ease so you can see them, but I'm only going to use those 3 wires, and those 3 wires are the black wire, the white wire, and the purple wire. And so those will be the 3 wires that I'll be using. So I'm going to hook my black ground wire to my ground here, just like we did in the previous lesson. I'm going to hook my white 5-volt voltage wire to my 5 volts. And then I'm going to hook my purple wire to my analog pin A0. And that's all there is to it. It's a pretty simple hookup. I'm sure you can make that happen. And so now we just need to get to programming. And so I'm going to switch our view so that we can make that happen. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with our Arduino connection. I'm going to make this bigger so that you can see it. All right, so this is basically the program that we wrote last week that we went through. And so I'm going to start with that, so there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And you can see we've set up variables here for our speed pin, for the direction we want the motor to go. Remember, on the direction pin, you've got to tell it to go in one direction. You got to make it high. And then in the other direction, you make it low. And that way the motor knows what direction to spin. And then we had our input speed, which this one's set to full blast, 255. And as we change the speed, we could change the speed of the motor. Then you went down here because we had pin modes. We set up, because we had pins, we set up pin modes here, and then we did a digital write, high or low, depending on what direction we wanted the motor to go, and then we told it to read the speed that we had entered in before. So now that we have a joystick in here, we've got to set up a few more variables. And so we've hooked up a pin, an analog pin, and so we're going to read off of that analog pin. And so we need to set up a variable to capture that data. So I'm going to do an int, and just like before, I'm going to call that Y pin, and we hook that to pin A0, and I'm going to do that, and you need to make sure that you're putting in your comments, because when you send me your work, I can't always follow what your thoughts are without comments, and so that helps me grade it. And if you help me grade it, your likelihood of getting a better grade improves. All right, so now that we've done that, we're going to read off the Y pin, and we're going to get some data, and we need to put that data somewhere. So I'm going to put that variable in, and I'm going to call that Y value. And this should all seem familiar to you because this is exactly what we did for the LEDs. And like I told you before, it may not seem exciting that we're turning LEDs on and off, but if you can turn an LED on and off, then you can turn a motor on and off. You can turn infrared sensors on and off. You can turn GPSs on and off. It's all part of the same programming. All right, so we have a new pin. So we probably should put in a new pin mode. So pin mode, and that pin mode was Y pin, and because it's coming into the Arduino, that's actually an input. Oh. And so now we have that done. And now we can go down here. So your homework assignment was to create a couple of if statements so that when the value reading from the joystick was whatever you wanted it to be, honestly, but it would make sense something above neutral or below neutral, then the motor would turn in that direction or the opposite direction. And so you needed to create some if statements to make that happen. But almost every one of you forgot that the joystick sends out a signal from 0 to 1023, and yet the motor is looking for a value from 0 to 255. And so we have to take that 0 to 1023 value and convert it just like we had to do for the LEDs. And I don't believe any one of you had done that. Your motor probably worked, but it probably didn't work like you thought it would. And that's the reason. And so the first thing I'm going to do under my void loop is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to say Y value, capital V, is equal to analog read, turns that happy color. And what are we reading? Well, we're reading the Y pin. Right? So now we've got a value from the Y pin that we call Y value, and we need to convert that into a value, a digital value that the motor will like. And so, and then we're going to put that in a bucket, and that value is actually going to be the speed that we want the motor to run. And since we already have a variable for speed, M speed, we don't want it to equal 255. Now we want it to equal the value from the joystick. I'm going to take out the 255, and I'm going to come back to my void loop, and I'm going to say M speed equals 255 what? Dot divided by 1023 dot in parentheses times, which is the shift 8, what? Well, my Y value. So now that converts it just like we learned from the previous lessons. So that will convert it into a value between 0 and 255. So now all I have to do is put my if statements in here. So let's think about this. If I want the motor to run in one direction when I push the joystick up, then I should put that if statement in there. So I'm going to put if my lowercase m speed is less than, and I don't really know this number right now, but once we run the program, I can adjust this based on the input that I get from my serial monitor. But right now, I'm just going to guess, and I'm going to say 125, which is roughly half of 255. So if my M speed is less than 125, then curly bracket. So first of all, I have to declare the direction. So I'm going to say digital right direction 1. It doesn't matter how you do this, but I'm just going to say low. Direction 1 is low. And digital right, you may have to change this when you're actually building a robot based on how the robot performs and which way the motor is going. High, H-I-G, right? So now I've got the direction the motor runs, but I don't have the speed. And so what do I need to do? I need to analog right what? To my speed pin. And I need pin. Pin. And what am I going to write? M speed. So now if I get a value from my joystick and it's less than 125, then the Arduino will write that speed to the speed pin and turn the motor that amount of speed. Well, what if it's above 125? Well, I need to have a condition for that, right? So if, I already see I made a mistake. if M speed is greater than 120, let's say 6, then what? Digital write direction 1, we'll turn it in the opposite direction, so we'll make it high, not that, high digital write. I can't type today. It's been a long day. Direction 2, low. And then we want to analog write to speed pin the M speed, right? M speed. So now think about it. If we get a value less than 125, we turn the motor in one direction and we turn it at the speed of the value that we get. If we get a value above 126, then we turn the motor in the opposite direction at the speed of that value, which sounds pretty good, but I want to be able to see what's going on. And so I'm going to turn my serial, I already turned my serial monitor on, but I'm going to be able to see what my M speed is. And that way I can get some values. And I remember I have a problem up here. Using good English, I capitalize that, but in Arduino, that's not what we want to do. All right, so I'm going to download this. We'll make this smaller so you can see. I'm going to download this to my Arduino. And I have an error. Really? Y value was not declared. Y val in this scope. Y value is declared right there. I must have spelled it wrong. Capital V. So that's, I typed it right there, but I did not type it right here. I'm going to change it back because our standard is Y value. So now that I've changed that, let's see if this happens. It's looking good. It's looking good. So now I'm going to go and turn on the power to my power supply. Hope you can see that. And it runs. It starts off right off the bat because I know it's got to be at some value, either 125, 126, or greater or less than. And then if I pull back, it changes and gets faster. And if I push, sorry, you can't see this. Oh, if I pull back, it gets faster because it's getting a higher value. And if I push forward, you can't tell, but it changed directions and getting a lower value and slowing down. But it's still getting a little bit of a number. So there it goes. So that's pretty cool, but if I have this joystick in the neutral position, I don't want my motor moving because that means I don't want my robot moving. So I need to go back to this view and I need to open my serial port and I need to see what values I'm receiving, and you can't see that. So let's see if we can make that happen. All right, so now I'm getting a value of 97. That seems awfully low. That's because my pen came out. There we go. All right, so I'm getting a value of 125 while my joystick is in the neutral position. Let's get that here. So in the new 125, 126 is really pretty bad because the motor's trying to turn one way 1 minute and the next. It's not actually stopping because the momentum is carrying it through, but I probably need to stop that before I burn out my motor, so I'm going to turn it off and do that. And then I'm going to go back. I want to change my programming here so that I can bear with me. All right, so I want to change my programming so that when I'm at that 125, 126 number, my motor is turned off. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is come back down here. I'm going to make this bigger. Hopefully you can see that. All right, so I'm going to put in another if statement in here. I'm going to say if m speed is equal 120, goodness gracious, 125, then I think I'll digital write direction 1 low digital, this is just to keep it from cavitating, make both of those low, and then I'm going to analog write. I mean, let's just think about this. If we don't want it to run, our speed pin should be 0, right? But we don't want to put a number down here in case we want to change that. We might want to run it at just a very small speed. I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call this variable off. Right? And I think I'll set off to 0. We'll just do it that way like this. So coming back here, my speed pin without two eyes would be off. All right, so that looks pretty good. The only problem is I'll have a conflict here, and so I'm going to make this 124, and I'm going to make this 127 just to give it a little bit of space because I saw just a few 126s on the serial monitor. So if I download this, which I'm going to do now, and I'm going to look at our program, and it seems to have let's just look at it. It seems to have downloaded. All right, nice. Then I'm going to turn my motor back on. All right, nothing happens, so that's pretty good because I'm in the neutral position. Oh, I bumped it. All right. My pen came out. That's what the problem is. My AO pen. What's going on? Came out again. All right. So neutral position, nothing happens. Pull back, the motor spins in that direction. Back to neutral position, it turns off. I push forward, spins in the opposite direction, but it stops when I get all the way there. That's not good. When I push the joystick forward, I want it to go faster, not slower. So you remember how we can fix that? Let's go back to here. So if I come up to here and I say when my joystick is below 124, got a problem here. I want it to run 255 minus M speed. So that inverses, remember that inverses for us. And plus fixing that will help. Try and do that here. Low, high. All right. Now let's download it. Get that out of the way. Look at our motor. All right, I don't have, I'm gonna move this where you can see it. All right, nothing is moving now, so I'm gonna try it. If I move forward, push it a little bit, further forward, the faster it gets. All right, back to neutral, stops. My robot stops. Now I wanna go backwards. The motor turns in the opposite direction. That is pretty cool. And if we had two motors, we can make them both do that. Two joysticks. We can make our robot pivot around. We could do all kinds of cool stuff. So this is the 10th lesson, and that's all we were supposed to have for our co-op class. I'll probably will continue with lessons moving forward, and I'll let you know if some more of those come out. But I appreciate you attending the class, and we definitely will have another one in the fall and probably a short 4-week class in August. I'm pretty sure of that, and I will let you know of those too. And so if you have any questions, give me a call, and thank you very much.